know, I don't think I can walk down there. I'm not sure what you're gonna do yet. Does that answer your question? I reckon. You did have that pro forma changes or something. There. We'll see.
Help me, because all this paper got me crazy.
That's what I thought. I'm not coming.
Okay, where is
Oh, listen.
What you doing? I am not.
Oh, okay.
It's gonna be like.
Okay, everybody, I got 5 o'clock. Do we have enough committee? Yeah, I think we have everybody here. So I will call the Development and Services Committee to order. Miss Only, will you call the roll for attendance?
Yes, ma'am. Pugh,
Here.
Horatio,
Here?
Barron,
Here.
English,
Here.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Perfect attendance. So item 2 is approval of minutes. 2A is the regular session of July 27th. Can't believe it's been that long. Pages 7 through 9 in our packet. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any adjustments to the minutes? Okay. Hearing none, I'll ask Ms. Only to call the roll for approval of the minutes as presented in our packet.
Pugh,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes?
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Item 3 is the adoption of our agenda. I will ask if there are any additions, deletions, or changes. Seeing none from staff, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Second? It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Only, will you call the roll? Oh, sorry, any discussion? Or you just, okay. Ms. Only, will you call the roll?
Pugh,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes?
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Great. We have 3 items for action this afternoon. Item 4A is move to direct staff to evaluate current zoning laws that permit zoning designations for large residential developments to remain in perpetuity and present options to reevaluate and/or rezone these properties if they are not developed within 7 years. Recommendations should include processes to ensure that zoning and the comprehensive plan remain consistent with the lived character of the community. So this is a large item. It's pages 10 through 442 in our packet. I'll start out by saying, do we have any input from staff regarding this item?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. You can see that the item does not have a recommendation from staff, and we do have members of the planning department here. So I'm going to actually ask, it's going to be Mr. Crooks today, to come down and address this information that you have in your packet in general. Mr. Crooks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Rounds. Madam Chair, members of council. So staff is recommending that we take no action in regards to this. So effectively, council has the ability to amend the zoning map as they see fit. So council is one of the 4 ways to amend the zoning map. So an adopted motion by council can effectively cause this to occur. So that's really kind of why we're recommending this in part. And then the other 2 is because of the ongoing processes that we have in place, or rather initiatives in place. So thinking about the rewrite and the mapping that goes along with it, and then also in part the comprehensive plan and the regular ongoing updates and evaluation that is associated with it.
Thank you. Is there anything from my colleagues on this item? Yes, Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Crooks. And if I could, maybe separate the different parts of the motion, because I want to ask questions about one part more than another. So if we, for right now, say they're kind of 2 parts, right? One part is looking at zoning of large tracts of land that exist in perpetuity, and another part is ensuring that things are consistent with the lived character of the community and the comprehensive plan. And so for right now, I'll just accept that, through the land development code rewrite that we're doing, through the comprehensive plan updates, for right now, I'll set it aside and assume that that will meet the needs of the lived character of the community. My question, however, is about the large tracts of land that are zoned in perpetuity. And for the sake of discussion, in this motion, it says 7 years just because there had to be a number, right? So 7 seemed like a good number to start with for conversation. My question or my challenge with some of these large tracts of land is not necessarily that they be automatically rezoned, but that there's a process that triggers the evaluation of specific parcels. So I know that we're doing that in the land development code, but the last time we did that was what, 94? That doesn't happen all the time. And so in my district, for example, right now, there is a housing development that's being developed that was zoned in, I want to say, as far as we can tell, in 1977. So it's been a minute. And so I'm trying to figure out if there's a process that can at least trigger a reevaluation of those tracts of land to see if they're still consistent with the lived character of the community, because we don't necessarily know what all the huge tracts of land are that are zoned for a specific thing. Does my concern make sense?
I think so. So I guess, more so the issue is more so process related. How do we go about looking at these areas that may or may not be consistent? And
part of it. Well, if you tell me that I can't flat out limit it by years, then after that I'll shift to process, because again, if there, and maybe it's you, if there is a large tract of land ferry that's automatically looking all the time every year saying, does this fit, does this fit, does this fit, then that's one thing.
Right.
But otherwise, you can have something that exists, again, this parcel from 1977, where there's nothing to trigger someone looking at it. They can just build at any time without a review. And so that's what I'm trying to address.
So I think one part of that is, so ultimately, is that current zoning that is in place, is that consistent with the comp plan, right? So if that zoning that is currently in place is consistent, then that should still be appropriate. Because that's meeting, the desired development pattern, land use and character, et cetera. So I guess your point more so, how do we go back and look at those that may have been zoned, several years ago? So with that that process that I mentioned as part of the comp plan evaluation, that comp plan update, so per that evaluation, we've been going back and looking at those land use decisions, so effectively what have been the rezonings in the past 5 years since the adoption of that plan. So we're taking a look at all of those. We haven't necessarily gone further back than that in time, but I think ultimately, if there is an area in particular that either council has a concern or planning commission had a concern, said, hey, let's take a look at this area. Can we see if these things are still consistent or not consistent? I think that would be an appropriate manner, is council could make that motion and say, hey, can we take a look at this area, see which properties may be consistent, which may not be, and that would be that, I think, to me at least, that proper process.
Could I just one follow-up, and I know my other colleagues have questions. So I hear you, and I guess, again, for me, it's part of a timing question. So let's say right now, we accept the land development code, it's approved, it goes into effect in 2022. And then there's some large tract of land that we okay then in 2022, and then the next thing you know, using my 1977 example, it's 2070, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there's going to be an automatic process to continue to evaluate that versus me manually trying to keep track of every parcel of land in my area. But I'm going to just pause there.
So I guess it still goes back to, so, I mean, ultimately map amendments are a legislative decision by council. And so, council made that decision, whether it was consistent or not consistent at that time, that was an appropriate thing that's there. In terms of, I guess, us going back and look at it, I mean, we don't necessarily have, I'm not using the right term there, but I mean, we can set up a process that says, hey, let's go back and look at previous map amendment decisions, see what's happened with them. Are they still consistent or not consistent? But I think us saying, all right, every 10 years we go about doing that, I think we can put that internal process in, or however, planning commission or whoever, we can institute that process, but it's going to not necessarily going to be always looking at, do we look at every area? Do we look at that specific area? It's just going to be one of those things where, if that thing was approved, it was approved for whatever reason, whether it was consistent or not, and if it still is or isn't, we wouldn't necessarily know unless we are, again, actively looking, as you kind of mentioned, and so.
Right, and I hear you, and I think that I would be amenable to looking at what that process could be, because again, just because something is consistent in 1977 doesn't mean that it's consistent in 2054, but right now there's nothing that automatically would trigger that process between 1977 and, random year.
Well, I mean, I think just kind of spitballing here, I think to me the thing that makes the most sense is, we're basically using this rewrite as a larger scale overview of what things should be mapped, how things should be mapped, and, the principles that we're using for the mapping process are based on the comprehensive plan, showing ensuring that consistency. So that'll be one thing that we're doing as part of the remapping process. But then even as we have the, full update of a plan, an interim evaluation, I mean, we can be looking at, the zoning of an area or the zoning of the county as a whole and say, do we need to be making proactive, map amendments in that case for areas and things like that. But I think it's also one of those things where, it could be a double-edged sword in that case where we might be saying, well, an area might need to be up zone versus be down zone in order to provide that consistency. So, just.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski had a question. I'll ask for members of the committee first, if that's okay.
Thank
Yes.
you, Madam Chair. Mr. Crooks, I just, to be clear, do we have an anticipated timeline when it comes to revising the comprehensive plan?
So not a specific timeline, no, ma'am. We will be having to do a full update in 2025, so we would need to have a new plan in place come March 2025. So we'll probably be looking around 2023 to really start that process, if not sooner, for the full plan. We do have some ideas for some interim updates, specifically things related to the future land use map, how we kind of strengthen that a little bit, related to kind of a sub-layer of what the future land use map is, and maybe making some higher level changes for what designations should be where, as we've kind of seen from the way that approvals have been and various input that we've been hearing from the community at large.
So may I do a follow-up or two? So with that, do I hear you say that perhaps, and no pun intended, but we're putting the pieces together of this document kind of as we go, as we lead up to the revision? That's what, is that what I hear?
I think you could say in part. So from the 2015 comprehensive plan, the major item that was an implementation outcome from that is the land development code rewrite. So that is the major thing that the comp plan says that we needed to do first before we could really do anything else in relation to it. So having that code in place that really gets that character, that development, that plan calls for, that's ultimately that first step, is having the new code in place that gets us really the fabric of what we're wanting to try to have with the overall plan.
And one last follow-up question, and I think I may be clear, and that is, so our land development rewrite is we are basing it upon our current comprehensive plan, which we know that this document currently needs to be updated, and within 2 years we'll be updating it. I guess my concern is that when we have a new land development code rewrite, will it not mesh well with what we are trying to do in the future? I'm really trying to put this together because it would appear that one would be working together, and it seems like maybe we really, as young people say, we're doing the most with this. We're really doing the most when it comes to, and maybe it's not just that logical, but for me, I'm thinking if this document, which I've read, can be updated every 5 years, we have one that's since 2015. We're spent a lot of time since I've been on council looking at the land development rewrite. And now, and you said that you're making it consistent with the current comprehensive plan. So if we're making it consistent with the current plan, what happens in 2025 to all this work that we've done? And maybe my colleagues think, maybe I'm overthinking it, but.
So one part of that, we started the code rewrite, and so basically the process to initiate it started in mid-2016. The rollout of that process, the initial engagement started in February of 2017. The code rewrite was only supposed to be about a 2-year process. So we were supposed to be done with it sometime in 2019. So we've gone over 2 years what the initial timeline for that was. So that's one part to that. Other part being, and I talk about it a little bit in the briefing document near the end under the additional comments, but what exactly is kind of the policy future? What does that look like? Codes are not something that you do large changes with a lot. So even going forward, if we do have a new code, when we have the new comp plan, how much change do we see with that from the current policy? What are those overall goals? What are all those overall objectives? What are those ultimate achievements that we're trying to have? How different does that ultimately look in terms of the character that we're trying to get development-wise? We're probably not going to see a whole lot of difference from what we have in the current plan to the future plan in terms of what that development should be looking like, outside of what the current proposed land development code is. Similarly, like I said, we probably won't be doing a code rewrite, every 10 years. We may have some minor updates throughout that period to address deficiencies and things of that nature, but ultimately this proposed code, while it will be providing, implementation for this, as we make updates to the comp plan, if there's additional guidance or further things that we need to have, we can make amendments to that code, but this code that we are looking at tonight is going to be getting us kind of leaps and bounds beyond what we have currently, even with the current code.
Okay.
Are you, okay, Ms. Newton, I think, has a follow-up to one of Ms. Barron's questions.
Just really quickly, I don't think I heard you necessarily say this in response to Ms. Barron's question, but additionally, isn't it correct that by state law, we do an update to the comprehensive plan every 5 years and then a significant revision or update every 10?
It's an update every 10. You don't have to do.
Oh, we don't have to do the 5.
No, ma'am.
But has it been our practice, though, every 5?
You do an evaluation,
okay,
and from there you can make kind of little revisions as you need or see fit. But the major update, so updating the plan as a whole, is done every 10. Yes, ma'am.
I think Ms. Bush is next.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, when you first started speaking regarding the time frame, and you said council has the authority, I just wondered if there were any legality arguments that challenge that authority.
I would defer to Ms. McLean on that one.
In what way were you talking? Authority to rezone, you mean?
Yeah. Talk about the years or the time once it's been.
No, ma'am. You could theoretically rezone something every 6 months if it made you happy, but, that process would be not good, and, you get into the issues of make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and those kinds of things, but you can rezone anytime you like. You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Malinowski.
I forgot what I wanted. Oh, Mr. Crooks, in your definitions, when you put them in, could we please get a definition of this new word that I've seen, blobby?
Well,
Right, I see it used a few times in here.
Gotcha.
Other than that, as you stated, you answered what I was going to comment on, that every 10 years we have to redo this future land use map, the comprehensive plan.
Yes, sir.
And the one item that you did put in here is a potential element for assisting in what we're asking for is adding a degree of change framework. And you went on to explain what that was. It's on page 15 of our agenda, if you need that, page 6 of 7 of yours. And you indicated what that would be and that it was done in an award-winning Memphis 3.0 comprehensive plan. Is that something that's going to be recommended for us in the new updated one? Is it something that, okay, answer that question first, please.
Yes, sir. So that'll be something that we as staff will be recommending as part of any future land use map update. So even as an interim update, or as even as part of a full update to the comprehensive plan. I think this is something that we should have in the future land use map going forward with any revisions that occur to that.
Is this something that could be implemented currently rather than waiting till 2025?
So I think, pretty much my intent behind the future land use map as an interim update is probably within the next year and a half. So really, once we get the new land development code in place, would be to then work more fully on the future land use map, what an update to that could be, and my intention would be to include this as a recommended update item. So having that degree of change in there. But I guess, yes, if it was council's will to, direct staff to begin implementing a degree of change thing, that would be the will of council, yes, sir.
Okay, so I mean, the method is there for council to come in and make changes as need be. I mean, something that's done 30 years ago, as was described here, doesn't necessarily have to
Yes, sir,
be
and
if
council,
we just look at the maps.
Yes, sir, and council always has that ability.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Ms. Newton?
Yes. So I think from my perspective, looking at what Mr. Malinowski was talking about in terms of the degree of change and how we might be able to look at that, looking at procedural ways that we might be able to have some of those time triggers that I think would make me feel better. I guess I'm inclined to ask if maybe we could hold this in committee and I could maybe chew on some of the things that you shared and come back to it. But then I also have a quick process question, and I'm not sure that it's appropriate here, but I would love it that if we held this in committee and it came back before us, that maybe we could not include the entire comprehensive plan and kill additional trees, that maybe we could just cite it as an addendum. No, it was great here.
I will go ahead and apologize for all of the other
it's okay.
attachments.
But I'm just saying, I want to hold this in committee, but I'm wanting to hold it in a less
So-friendly.
in a more eco-friendly way moving forward, if that's something that we're able to do. So, is there any other discussion before I move?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Newton. I will also want to acknowledge that Chair Livingston and Vice Chair McBride are here, and let you all have an opportunity. Do you have any questions or comments on this item? Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion then?
I move to hold this item in committee.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Only to call the roll.
Hughes,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Okay. That brings us to item 4B, the Division of Solid Waste and Recycling, Richland County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12 rewrite. That takes us all the way to page 443 through 489. And I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay. How about we'll start with any staff updates on this item before we go to questions from committee?
So in the document, there's certainly information in there. I do have members from Public Works here. I'll go ahead and ask at this time, Mr. Podium, if you just come to the podium, please, Mr. Eversman. But if council has questions, Madam Chair, we're certainly ready to take those questions at this time.
Thank you. I'll entertain any comments or questions from the committee. Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have an opportunity to review the document. However, I would have liked to have gotten a markup version so that I could compare what the changes were. As a new council member, it's very difficult for me to weigh in on something if I don't know what the changes are. And so I would like to, if you could please provide that to council, I would feel more comfortable with being able to give input.
Madam Chairman, members of County Council, Chris Eversman, Deputy Director of Public Works, and I understand, ma'am, your question, your concern, and under normal circumstances, if it were easily accomplished with some strikeouts and underlines, we would have certainly, followed that procedure. But that might be a good segue to kind of what our staff intent here is, and to share with you, and we are certainly available to discuss, and however we need to present this, such that it would facilitate your consideration. We certainly are pleased to do. I would almost say that this is like a clean slate approach. Without any criticism, the old solid waste, I shouldn't even call it a solid waste and recycling ordinance, because in the old ordinance, there wasn't even mention of a recycling program. And that, I think, is very illustrative of how dated the old document was. And frankly, if you read it, and it is included in the packet, you will see that it's really just a patchwork. And again, it was probably, when it was first passed, it was appropriate, but just over time, it was just kind of tweaked, and was really a patchwork, and became sort of a disjointed document. What we are providing for you and would ask for you to consider is a comprehensive, almost total rewrite. And I would kind of direct your attention to the page 444 of your packet. It's the second page of the agenda briefing, and under the strategic and generative discussion portion, there are 7 points there that kind of outlined what we were trying to accomplish in this, again, kind of clean slate rewrite. For example, we addressed programs. As I said, in the earlier ordinance, there wasn't even mention of a recycling program. We talk about all of the municipal solid waste management programs which have developed and honed and are offered over time. Update our terminology. We reflect and codify our best practices. And very importantly, we address the issue of structure and funding for our solid waste program. This is over a $26 million program, and there was nothing in the ordinance, believe it or not, that broke down as an example what the fees are supposed to cover, or what the millage is supposed to cover. So that is, I think, a very significant point to be considered. There was also redundancy from other ordinance chapters, and we do establish, and again, there was nothing that we could find that was written down as to specifically how the solid waste curbside collection program fee was calculated. It exists, I'm sure, in some people's heads, but we now actually have it incorporated into the ordinance. And then something that I do want to highlight, I don't want to gloss over or not mention or anything else like that, because in all honesty, it has the potential to be probably the most controversial aspect of what is being proposed by the staff. And that is a requirement for yard waste, which we do pick up once weekly in the curbside collection program, to be bagged, boxed, or bundled. And again, this is a requirement that we would advocate, but it is different from how we do it currently and how it has been done as far back as probably anyone can remember. A lot of people do it, but also a lot of people don't. And it would, we believe, it would certainly increase the efficiency of the curbside collection program. And based on our current RFPs, which are under review, we believe that it could provide a meaningful cost savings. And we will find that out in the course of that review of those proposals. So again, very comprehensive. And again, on the chart that is between the newly written ordinance and the old ordinance, Mrs. Barron, it looks like this. So you can see the sections that were carried over from the old ordinance into the new ordinance, and that might assist in your review.
Thank you, it does. And I just want to tell you, my question is not reflective of the work that you guys
Yes, ma'am,
have done
understand.
at all. But, you know, I'm a scholar, so I want to make sure that when I'm reading, I'm paying attention to the details that need to be paid attention. But thank you for pointing this out
Yes, ma'am.
to me, and I can definitely review this once again, comparing the two. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. Anything else from the committee? Okay. Well, I'll just, Ms. Newton, yes. No, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for answering Ms. Barron's question, because that is the question that I was also going to ask. But I just want to be clear as we look at this of two things. One is the time sensitivity of it and what the implications are, because I know there's certain things that need to be in place before you can award new contracts, et cetera. So for this item, again, is it time sensitive? And if so, what are those time sensitivities? And then secondly, what, if any, dependencies are tied up in this document?
Yes, ma'am. And again, I would say that probably the biggest one is the issue of yard waste being bagged, bundled, or boxed. That is an alternative that was included in the request for proposals for the three collection areas. So the two are tied in that regard.
So that's a connection and a dependency, and then from a time sensitivity perspective?
Yes, ma'am. We would be looking to hopefully make an award, and that is three of our curbside collection service areas. So pretty significant number of households that would be impacted by those awards. But we would definitely want to, enact a countywide policy such that there's no confusion between different service areas and things like that.
I think you're looking for like a specific date, is what you're asking, or a month?
I am, yes.
Okay. So, right now, like you said, we do currently have some out to bid, so ideally, we would like to be able to have this approved so we can get to council. So, here, within the next month, I would say, be honest with you, because we have those current bids out right now. So, if this could carry to council, and then be available for council to consider, and ultimately approve in October, that will give us time to consider all those new bids with this information in it.
Thank you. And then I guess as a follow-up to that, because, again, this is no surprise. I told you right out in the hall that, I'm concerned about the bundling. And a few things. I'm concerned about public input about it, but I'm also concerned about public education, because I will tell you, If I had a nickel for every constituent that is not clear on what goes into a Richland County recycling can, I would be a wealthy, wealthy woman, because there are people in my house that didn't know until we got the sticker, to just be honest. And so that is such a huge change. And then part of also what is challenging for me as a council member is I know that your staff has been working and bending over backwards to do everything you can to make our haulers do a better job picking up yard waste. However, we're at a time where people have been having more trouble than ever getting their yard waste picked up, and we're simultaneously going to say, by the way, we want you to do even more work. And so I just feel like that's a little bit challenging for me, particularly if we're not going to have any kind of public input about that whole bundling, just to make sure we're looking at it. And I know that your staff does this all the time, but is there something else that's maybe not even a binary choice? Because right now we're saying, do it the way that you do it, or bag it all. I don't know if there's some sort of middle ground or compromise, or I don't know, but making that substantive of a change without more involvement from the public, even if it's only from a in a perfect world, they're talking to us and we're listening to them. But if we can't do that, at a minimum, us communicating with them, I just would like to find some way that we can do that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I think to that point, I believe that and I'll ask the staff to correct me, but I believe a couple of these contracts are not up until, I believe it's February. And so the idea, like we talked about before, was not to get to the last minute. So that would give us time in order for, if the council chose to consider going down this path, then that would give us an additional amount of time. And then also the contractors, and the bagging, bundling, and I know we were talking about contractors, but all of them said that would increase their ability to address those issues. So that was something when we met with all of the contractors, we talked about that a couple months ago, all of them said the same thing about that. So considering that was one of the reasons why, in conjunction with staff, we thought it would be something to address. But all the contractors also agreed that it would require a period of education. So the expectation would be that there would not be a light switch turn on, turn off. There would be, in a period of education, that this would be something that the county has approved to happen. So I do think that there's some movement to discuss, to your point. But initially, we definitely need to get this out in front of the committee so we can discuss whether or not we're even going to be considering this idea of the bagging and the bundling for the community.
And again, I think we definitely need to consider it. And I am completely 100% clear that the service will be faster and more efficient. I guess I just feel like I'm hearing approve it first, and then we'll talk about it. And I'm saying, is there some way that we can talk about it and get community input before we do it? Thanks.
I have Ms. Malinowski tried. Is that okay? Okay.
Hey, Madam Chair, Assistant Director Eversman, this bag box bundled stuff has been around for several previous councils. It was always discussed. It was always voted to not have that. Part of the problem was what type of requirement is there going to be on bagging? Because in previous councils, when this came up, the recommendation at times was, well, we want to make sure we're using biodegradable bags rather than somebody just going out and get a big plastic bag made from whatever that's not biodegradable. This adds, even no matter what kind of bags you use, it adds additional costs to the consumer who's paying for a service anyway. Also, the other part, as far as when you stated the equivalent of 2 roll carts, well, possibly if the taxpayers were given 2 additional roll carts that want it because they do a lot of yard trash, they may be more amenable to doing it that way. I don't know if that's a thought that's out there or not.
Yes, sir. Understand, we did not in the draft ordinance as was written, address the issue of the composition of the bags. We were silent on that, so that's one thing. But second thing is that placement of yard waste in roll carts would also increase the efficiency significantly, but it would also involve a capital cost, probably several $1 million, which again is maybe over time that would be appropriate, but that is something that could be discussed and considered. I would also like, and again, not to at all, deflect from the issue of yard waste, but I do want to point out, as far as the baby in the bathwater, yard waste is less than a page of the recommended ordinance. There is a lot of other things in here, and I would just ask that if the issue of yard waste becomes problematic or causes us to stumble, there are still, like I say, a lot of that could be easily taken out, and there are a lot of improvements and things that I hope would not get overlooked.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. McBride?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Malinowski addressed some of my concerns about the bag, bundle, and box, because I really didn't know what that meant. And so I'm sure a lot of constituents don't really understand the meaning of it. And also, you have to think many people could not even afford to buy bags to put the trash in. And I think it'll end up having more fines that we can't control, and actually having more trash out because people will not be able to do it. So I have major concerns about I think it's an excellent idea, but in terms of constituent needs and being able to follow through, I have concerns about that. And also, this may be different, Madam Chair, but the timing where you have to call for an appointment only, that's an issue because a lot of people just don't know where to call and what to do. And I know we do excellent PR and all, but there are a lot of citizens that don't get the information, and therefore the trash is just out there. So consideration, I would ask that it be given to every so often just to check anyway, even if there's not an appointment, that you would check to make sure that the trash is moved. Because if you look at the ombudsman's calls, most of the calls are regarding trash and waste, and I get a lot of complaints about it. So those are my concerns right now, even though I think it would be good if we could do it, but I'm more concerned about how the constituents would respond.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to go to the baby in the bathwater. And I'll say it again. Y'all done a great job with this, and not only have you done a great job with this document, but and hats off, and I'll call her Cindy C, because I will not pronounce her last name, but the marketing efforts that she put forth in the recycle program is second to none. And I say that if we're going to create an ordinance as a rewrite, then the marketing efforts that was put forth with the recycle program should definitely mirror the recycle program or greater. And the education there is critical. I have, just for me, I have bundles of those marketing materials that I'm always passing out throughout the community. If we're going to make a significant change like this, we have to make sure that our citizens know what's happening and how this is going to impact their day-to-day life. It's not enough for us just to say, hey, we're going to create an ordinance and get in where you fit in. That's not fair. That's not fair. And I know that we are on a deadline, and I've said it before, I'm not big about kicking the can down the street. I want us to get this done and to make sure it's done in excellence. And as we put forth the plan, the effort that you all have put forth to give us a great draft, as you're starting to think for us to approve this draft, think about the marketing plan that's going to go along with this. Because I have about 10 seniors in my head who I know they're going to call me and say, they didn't pick up my trash because it's not in a bag. So, and it may seem minute and small, but these are the citizens who are pushing us forward every day. And so, small portion of a big ordinance, but a great impact if we don't do it right.
Yes, ma'am, and appreciate that. And again, I would just, another thing that this ordinance does is, right now, we have some disconnects between our practices and our contracts for the curbside collection program and the ordinance. And this update will help bring those things together. And again, I just I just want to point out, the old ordinance didn't even mention the word recycling in it.
Anything else from the committee? I have a question, if not. Okay, so I guess I have a few different things. I will reiterate the sentiments of my colleagues around, making sure that we get a lot of public information out there. I mean, I feel like I see the billboard around, I know what to do with my kitchen oil, so that level of outreach. The other question is, in terms of a practical implementation of the plan, is there, because we've all said we're going to hear from our constituents, is there some kind of a grace period or something like that can be, are there thoughts around, on day one, is it no tolerance, or is there kind of a period of a little bit of a time?
Yes, ma'am. I think that from a practical standpoint, that would come back to the staff and our, trying to be human, compassionate, and understanding in dealing with our citizens, and I'm sure there would be.
Great. And then my other question, something that came to mind in hearing the discussion today, is around we're talking about bag, box or bundle. And I think I shared with you that I once lived in an apartment where I had to take a large rotten tree stump from my backyard through my house because there was no way around. So I was glad to have that bagged up. But, lots of us just kind of like to drag everything to the street. So I'm thinking about the programs where we do things like help provide things like rain barrels and compost things. Could there be some kind of a program where we might be able to help provide at some reduced cost some biodegradable bags and kind of get people used to that idea, and then maybe they pick up the habit and run with it? Could we work with maybe conservation or something on a program like that?
I'll go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Good try. I think the answer to your question is yes. What nobody wants to say is that we're still talking about additional cost, and then when we start looking at all this in totality, where those funds kind of get shifted from. And the reason why the staff said they didn't talk about biodegradable bags versus other kind of bags, because they did not want to put a threshold amount on requiring people to pay more money to do the trash, just because we believe that ultimately the end result would be for them to be able to pick up the trash better, which would reduce the cost the haulers charge us, which would reduce the cost that goes to the citizens, is the idea. But yes, ma'am, that is something that we definitely can consider and figure out how we could work that into our cost considerations.
Okay, and perhaps maybe there's even some kind of a grant or something that is available for that kind of work. Okay, so thank you. Is there since this is an item for action, is there a motion on this item? What do you all want to do? Yes, Ms. Barron?
Before we have a motion, because I don't want to prolong this, and it hinders what's already moving. If we hold it in committee, and this is Mr. Brown, if we hold it in committee and to get, just a little bit more time to sit with it and kind of just read it again, will it impact what's current going on? Because we won't meet again until the end of the month.
So to your question and to some of the other things we've been trying to do here, you have a little time. What we're talking about, the contracts, they're not expired until February. But we're trying to do a better job about giving opportunity for us to do things without being last minute. So, yes, ma'am, you can hold it in committee. We would like to probably at the latest, you're talking about maybe January, if you were going to approve it, because then you have the awards, and then you still have time, the contractors are going to have to give time to also educate if the council approves that. So, yes, ma'am.
I appreciate the opportunity to not have to rush so much. Thank you.
Is that a motion to hold
Yes.
it? Okay, is there a
That
second?
is, yes.
Sorry, Chair Livingston, you had your hand up.
I just want to be clear on the staff recommendation before we get a motion on this later on, because I think that's going to be really important for me to clearly understand exactly what the recommendation is.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, Ms. Olney?
Pugh,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Barron, English,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Okay, thanks, everybody. One more item, 4C for action, Division of Solid Waste and Recycling, Solid Waste Management Plan. That's pages 490 through 583. Mr. Eversman had a seat. I don't know if we're going to have
We have the
more.
General Manager, John Ansel, here from Solid Waste, so.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, we'll try to do what we can in the 10 minutes, or 9
Got it.
minutes.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, really quickly, I'm not sure that this one will have as much discussion, but I do want to give my colleagues an opportunity to address this item. Are there any questions, comments from anybody? Ms. Newton?
Well, I mean, I would love for us to allow him to just give a brief overview.
Yes, please, I'm sorry.
That's
Please,
fine. No,
please
ma'am.
say anything that you would like to say related to this item.
Yes, ma'am. Just a brief overview of the Solid Waste Management Plan. The South Carolina Solid Waste Policy and Management Act requires DHEC to create a statewide solid management plan. And in turn, DHEC then requires all the counties and the municipalities that manage solid waste to create what they call a local plan. This plan that you are looking at today would be Richland County's local solid waste management plan, and that would therefore satisfy the requirement of the Policy and Management Act. An overview, it's simply a plan of how solid waste is managed in Richland County today, and some of the things we need to be looking forward to in the next 5 to 10 years going forward with regards to solid waste management. It talks about population, it talks about industry, it talks about landfill capacities, and a number of other issues in here, all taking it into consideration.
So much. Yes, Mr. Pugh.
I would like to thank the entire Solid Waste Division for all the hard work that you guys do, especially with some of the circumstances that you're under with the short staff and the short staff with practice. Just appreciate you guys for still hanging.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, and everybody else there would too.
Great. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hanzo, this particular plan, from what I was reading here, is pretty much a requirement by the state, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And you followed whatever they've dictated us to do then?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, thank you.
Clear. Anything else from the committee? Ms. Newton?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Olney to call the roll.
Pugh,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Thank you.
The last thing on our, or not next to last thing on our agenda is the item 5, items pending analysis, no action required here. This is the motion to direct the county attorney to work with the county administrator to research and draft an absentee landlord ordinance. I won't read the full motion at this time. And we did have a meeting last month around this item. and I think we made some good progress. So I'll look forward to information from staff based on that internal meeting. And I'll just also say that I know that we have some constituents who are anxiously awaiting some action on this item. All right. So that's item 5, and then item 6 is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Thank you. What calls the roll?
Pugh,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton. Yes. Motion passes.
Okay, thanks, everybody. We have 6 minutes until A&F meets.